Okay. Hello, everyone. Quick question. Show of hands. If I offered you $1 million to point to Eritrea on a map, how many of you would be millionaires? That's okay, you're not alone. Eritrea is one of the world's best kept secrets. It's a country that's tucked away, hiding in plain sight, right on the coast of the Red Sea, in the Horn of Africa. It's got Saudi Arabia and Yemen as neighbors across the water, Sudan to the west, Ethiopia to the south, and tiny Djibouti to the southeast. Now, when people have heard of Eritrea, they sometimes have a, shall we say, intense mental image. You might hear phrases like the North Korea of Africa. And yes, it's a very private, misunderstood, and politically complex country. We'll touch on that. But today, we're not just going to talk about politics, we're going to talk about the soul of Eritrea. We are talking about a place with world-class scuba diving, a capital city that looks like a time capsule from 1930s Italy, a population obsessed with cycling, and one of the most incredible coffee cultures on the planet. So let's start at the beginning. I mean, the real beginning. We're not talking about 1950s history, we're talking ancient. Eritrea was a major player in the ancient world. This region was home to the legendary kingdom of Axum, one of the four great powers of the ancient world alongside Rome, Persia, and China. This was a civilization minting its own coins, building giant single stone obelisks that still stand today, and trading with the entire known world. The port city of Adulis on Eritrea's coast was the ancient world's version of the Dubai airport. Everything passed through it: ivory, frankincense, gold, textiles. This is also one of the first places in the world to adopt Christianity. Way back in the 4th century, we're talking about monasteries carved into desert cliffs that are so old they make European cathedrals look like modern art. So Eritrea is ancient. It's strategic, and that strategic location right on the Red Sea is the reason for its entire modern story. Everyone wanted a piece of it. The Ottomans, the Egyptians, the British, but the group that truly shaped modern Eritrea was Italy. In the 1880s, the scramble for Africa was on, and Italy wanted its own place in the sun. They colonized Eritrea, and they didn't just build forts, they built a nation. And they brought a few things with them: coffee, pasta, and architecture. They poured money into the capital city, Asmara. They didn't just build a colonial outpost, they built Piccola Roma, Little Rome. They built cinemas, apartments, cafes, and futuristic, bizarre buildings that are now collectively a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We're talking about buildings shaped like airplanes, Art Deco cinemas with names like Cinema Impero. We're talking about futuristic gas stations like the famous Fiat Tagliero building that looks like it's about to take off. Imagine walking down the street sipping a perfect macchiato from a vintage espresso machine, while a 1950s Fiat putters past a building that looks like it was designed by the Jetsons. That's Asmara. But Eritrea's story isn't just about ancient stones and Italian architecture. It's about the people and the grit that forged this nation. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so moving on to cultural mosaic. Thank you, Ranu. So we have this stunning Art Deco city, Asmara, sitting 7,000 feet high in the cool highlands. But who lives there? This is not one single group of people. Eritrea is a cultural mosaic with nine distinct ethnic groups. You have the Tigrinya people in the highlands, who are primarily Christian, and the Tiger people in the lowlands, who are primarily Muslim. You have the Rashida nomads who live in the coastal desert, and the famous and they are famous for the stunning silver jewelry. You have the Kunama, the Saho, the Alpha, each with its own language, music, and traditions. And what unites them to two things really: a fierce sense of national pride and food, or the food. The heart of every Indonesian home is the injera. It's a giant, sour, spongy, delicious flatbread that doubles at your plate, your pork and your milk. You don't get your own little dish. A giant platter of injera is placed in the center of the table, and is covered in piles of colorful, spicy stews called crispy or chisney. You tear off a piece of injera, a pinch of a beef stew, and eat. It's a commu communal. It's a messy, and it's amazing. But even more important than the food is the coffee. In Arica, you don't just grab a coffee. You don't go through a drive-through. If someone invites you for coffee, you need to clear your schedule. This is the Arician coffee ceremony. It's a ritual, and it is almost always performed by a woman. First, she'll bring out fresh green coffee beans and roast them right in front of you in a small pan. She'll whirl the pan around the room so you can smell the smoke, which is called the pressing room. Then she grinds the beans by hand with a mortar and a pestle. She brews the coffee in a traditional clay pot called turbina. The coffee is then poured from a height without spilling a drop into a tiny handleless cups. And you don't just have one, you have three rounds. The first cup, the will is the strongest and most important. The second, the caliph is a bit weaker, and the third is a barika, is one of the is the one for the road, a blessing. The whole ceremony can take an hour or more. It's not about the caffeine, it's about the community, it's the original social work. And this culture, this deep sense of community is what fueled Orisha for one of the longest, toughest struggles for independence in modern history. Remember how Anouk said the Italians left? Well, after the World War II, the UN decided to federate Eritrea with its massive neighbor, Ethiopia. It was not a popular destination. Ethiopia quickly annexed Eritrea, abolished its government, and banned its languages. The Eritrean people said absolutely not. What followed was the Eritrean War of Independence. It didn't last a year, it didn't last a decade. It lasted for 30 years, from 1961 to 1991. It was the it was a true David versus Goliath story. A tiny, under-equipped group of uh, Er- Eritrean freedom fighters took on the largest, best-trained army in sub-Saharan Africa, which were backed first by the United States and then by the Soviet Union. The Eritrean fighters, both men and women, fought from hidden bases, hidden bases in the desert mountains. They built underground hospitals, factories. They recycled old materials to make new weapons. They taught themselves surgery and ran schools in stretches. Finally, in 1991, they won. They marched into Asmara victorious. They held a UN monitor refer referendum, and the vote was 99.8% for yes, yes for being a country. The 30-year was its defining event of modern Eritrea. Is why the country is so self-reliant, so tough, and sometimes so insular. They they feel they earned their freedom with blood, and they aren't going to let anyone mess with it. So this is what fearless, independent, resilient, coffee-loving nation like today.
Okay, thank you, Chi. So Eritrea is born 1991, a brand new country full of hope, built on 30 years of struggle. Now, address the elephant in the room. The country that emerges in complex. When you read about Eritrea today, you see words like selective, militarized, and isolated. And that's part of the story. Following independence, the government establishes a policy of national service. It was meant to rebuild the country and protect its hard-won freedom, especially after another brutal border war with Ethiopia from 1998 to 2000. However, the national service has, for many, become indefinite, leading to a difficult human rights situation that causing many young people to leave the country. It's a single-party state that values self-reliance above all else. This makes it a very difficult place to be a journalist and a very easy place to misunderstand. This was finally declared with Ethiopia in 2018, opening a new chapter, but the future is still being written. But that's the politics. That's not the people. The spirit of Eritrea is not its government, but it's in culture. And I want to leave you with the most fun parts of that culture. First, let's talk about sports. What the national sport? Soccer? Basketball? No, it's cycling. Eritrea is a cycling superpower. It's upset. When a major race is on, the entire country shuts down to watch. Why cycling? Well, remember the Italians? They brought two things, espresso machines and racing bikes. Combine that with a capital city at 7,000 feet, which is a perfect high altitude training ground, and a population with that 30-year work rate, and you create a world-class athletes. Eritrean riders are dominating the sport. You may have heard of Binigam Gimay. In 2022, he became the first Black African rider in history to win a stage of Grand Tour, the Giro d'Italia. He's a national hero. When these cyclists come home from a race, they are greeted with a parade of tens of thousands of people. It's incredible. And what about tourism? Well, it's not easy to visit, but if you do, it's an adventure. Forget the highlands, let's go to the coast. Eritrea has over 700 miles of untouched Red Sea coastline. And just offshore, you have the Dalat Archipelago. This is a chain of over 120 islands, almost all of them completely uninhabited. This isn't a tourist trap. This is one of the last truly wild marine ecosystem on Earth. You can go scuba diving in shipwrecks from World War II, swim with dolphins, and camp on a deserted beach. And the only other living things you see are the camels that local Alpha people brings to the islands to graze. Yes, camels on a tropical beach. And finally, if you want one last Eritrean magic, you can ride the Eritrean Railway. This isn't some modern bullet train. This is a 1930s steam train, originally built by the Italians that slowly snakes its way from the coastal desert of Massawa up, up, up the mountains through 30 tunnels across 65 bridges to the capital of Asmara. It's considered one of the most beautiful and darling railway journeys in the world. They even have a vintage 1930s Litorina, a single-car Fiat railcar that looks like it's rode straight out of a Wes Anderson movie. So, what is Eritrea? It's not a simple, easy-to-define place. It's not just a political deadline. It's an ancient kingdom and a brand new nation. In the 1930s, Art Deco film set, and it's a 30 years old chain. It's the home of ancient monasteries. It's the future of professional cycling. It's a country of 9 languages, one coffee pot, and a level of resilience that is hard to comprehend. It's one of the most unique, complex, and surprising countries on earth, and now you can point to it on a map. Right? Question? Thank you.